Claybourne Elder, welcome to Cultural Attaché.
Thank you very much. I love the name of the
Thank you.
show. It's
Thank you.
great. Yeah,
A friend of mine came up with that for me because she said, you're my cultural attaché. So thus the name was born.
it's really perfect.
So we're talking about your show, If the Stars Were Mine, which you'll be performing at the Segerstrom Center in Costa Mesa, February 20th through 22nd. And then the following weekend at Feinstein's at the Nico in San Francisco on the 28th and March 1st. Um,
Yes.
so like anyone, you've grown and you've evolved since you first started doing this show, If the Stars Were Mine. How has the show grown and evolved since you first started performing it? And if so, how?
Yeah. I started doing this show right after Company ended, and I had done cabaret shows before and toured them, and I was like, I want to do something different. Um I'm a writer and a storyteller as well, and kind of do stand-up stuff in my side life. And so I was like, I'm going to start with what I want to say. And I was like, what do I want to say that's really scary and what I like that I don't want to talk about in front of people? And I started writing, and then I fit the songs in around what I wanted to say. And it was a different process for me. And I ended up working with a like a comedian and some other people on it. And I set out, like I had a little tour booked of it, and that was 2 years ago. And then the show just kind of, as I did it, people started talking about it, and more people started booking it and booking it and booking it because it's different than there's more talking than a cabaret show, and there's more singing than a stand-up show, because there'd be no singing in a stand-up show. And I word kind of got out about it, and now it's booked through this summer. And all the places that I started the show are now reaching out and asking if I'll do a second, like, what's my new show going to be? And this one is very personal to me, and it has changed and grown a lot, and really just clarified. But it's sometimes dirty, sometimes funny, hopefully very moving, also in the end. And yeah, it's my favorite thing to do. I love doing it.
How does it remain moving for you to do it?
What'd you say?
How does it remain moving for you? I mean, if you've been doing it for 2 years, how do you still
Yeah,
get moved by it? Because
you
we're
know,
not,
I've
but the audience won't be unless you are.
yeah, it's different every time I do it. And that's true of any, I think, performance I give. I'm not really interested in doing the same thing twice. I want to like do what like take the inspiration from the day as well. And so it's not like the material changes all that much, but I share some things, like I said, I share some things that I sort of never thought I would share in front of people, and that are very deeply personal to me and will probably be deeply personal and moving to me for my entire life. So 2 years in the scope of that probably isn't very much for things that, like, some of the, big and deepest things that have happened to me.
Now, the show on the website for the Segerstrom is described as a hilarious, heartfelt, and surprisingly filthy evening, which is a great and truly provocative line.
Oh, good. I
But
wrote
what
it.
what do you want audiences to understand about you through this show that promises to explore what exactly happens when you eat the body of Christ?
You know, I carefully crafted that little blurb about it because it is not the show is like it's not only for gay people. It's not only for it is sometimes filthy, and that, like, I do tell some dirty stories, but nothing that is my dirty is probably not very dirty, because I'm just like, I was raised a good little Mormon boy. But I do explore sort of the nature of goodness in the show. And so I do talk about sex a little bit, and I do talk about things that are sometimes dirty. And but I wanted to make sure people, I say surprisingly filthy, because again, I think that people look at me and they're like, what a nice gay ex-Mormon dad. What a nice guy. And I am, but also once you get to know me, I am sort of dark and twisted and messed up. And so I think I really wanted to share that with people too, is sort of my dark sense of humor. Um, so yes, that is what they can expect.
Is that where pots and pans come in? I haven't seen the show, but I have seen clips.
Yes, that is where pots and pans come in. The first time my mother heard me tell that joke, she was like, I'm not sure I wanted to hear you tell that joke. And I was like, that's fair. That's fair, Mom.
At least you did it in a palatable way.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Yeah.
Now, you have a wonderful Instagram account.
Oh,
And
thanks.
what I love most is that we really get to understand who you are as an artist and most importantly who you are as a father to Bo. What does your Instagram tell us about you that is different than what your show does and vice versa?
Oh, that's very interesting. You know, my Instagram account, I try to be very transparent. I try, like, I try to not show very much of a filtered version of my life per se. You know, like videos of Bo and I having conversations that I post or things. They're just real things that have happened. And I think that, my show, I hope is sort of the same actually. And I've never really thought about it that way, but they are both how I portray myself. And it is not a character version of me, it's just me. And for better or worse, I mean, take it or leave it, I guess. But like my show too is weird, and I think that that's true of my Instagram too, is like my weird humor or weird things that I think are interesting I post. And um they're maybe not for everybody, but it's flattering to me to hear that you say you like it. It's because I enjoy it.
Well, I'm not the only one who likes it. This morning, I think you had 89,200 followers. So clearly it's resonating with people.
Somebody told me the other day, a friend of mine reached out and was like, I was chatting about you or saying something about you, and somebody at the dinner table said, "Wait, do you mean Claybourne Elder, the apex gay dad?" I was like, "I'm the apex gay dad? That's great. I'll take that."
Yeah, tough to live up to because
I
that
know, I know.
wait till when they want to knock you off that pedestal.
Oh, gee. Well, or Bo does. Bo does definitely challenges my parenting all the time.
Yeah, but I love the intimacy of those conversations and how you don't have rehearse. How could you not that you could have rehearsed lines for some of the questions that he asks you, whether it's about, Christmas, or any of the number of things he asks you on there. But what have you learned about who you are as a man as a result of these questions that Bo asks you?
Oh, this is absolutely what I talk about in my show. Um, is is what happens to you when suddenly you have someone who you love coming and asking you what your belief system is, as he's grown up. And I have these filmed conversations with him on the internet, and it came about because my mom, when he was born, said to me, take a million photos. Always take photos, always take videos. You will never regret taking too many. So in times when you're like, oh, I've taken too many photos, she was like, just always have the camera on because you'll just want to look back at pictures of him and videos when he was a little kid. So he started asking, like, when he would ask a funny question, what I usually do is I just like pull out my phone and I just sort of set it somewhere where I think it'll capture us. And I'm like, hey, I didn't hear you. What did you say? And then he'll ask the question again, like, why do we celebrate Christmas? And then we have we have a little chat about it. And it's true that like when you have to explain Christmas to a little kid for the first time, you're like, I don't know, what do I think Christmas is? And you really do things that you just take for granted or don't process anymore. You have to reprocess and make decisions about how you feel about them and what you believe about them. And that is a really profound and challenging and entertaining and thrilling thing to do.
And you get to tell the truth on certain levels. Like when you talk about how, yeah, we celebrate Jesus Christ, who wasn't really born on this day, which is not what most of the world wants to hear.
Yeah.
I mean that being honest, I think is really refreshing.
Oh, good. It's funny. I think that Christmas one is my favorite because I love just he's so little at the time, and I was telling him the whole Jesus story because that's why it's called Christmas. And then I got to the Santa Claus part and I realized I was like, then that's another part of the story that we have. And
I love how his face lit up when you mentioned Santa Claus, though, because that he
yeah, yeah, he gets
understands.
excited. Yeah.
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 Now, you had a previous cabaret show called I Want to Be Bad that you did.
Yes. So
Uh,
these are actually two versions of the same show.
Really,
Um,
is one more adult than the other?
yes, yes. The I Want to Be Bad one is slightly more adult. Also, it's just different branding, honestly. There were there were touring houses and art centers that were like, we don't know if our audience is going to love that name. And I was like, I totally understand that. And also, I have like these photos where I'm wearing devil horns and things that were just for fun. And so they are two slightly different versions of the show for different audiences because I would be foolish not to, I mean, like I do the show, like I've done the show in Provincetown. And when I did it in Provincetown, it was I Want to Be Bad and it was a little more body and, things like that. So it's the same. I talk about a lot of the same stuff, but there are additional things in each show that aren't in the other one, if that makes sense.
Well, it's interesting because I would think that Segerstrom Center, because it's in Orange County, which is traditionally considered one of the more conservative parts of Southern California, although San Diego really gets that, and the Inland Empire get that moniker.
Yeah.
But I could see you doing the alternate title and the slightly alternate show in San Francisco. I guess the Nico
Mhm.
wanted something a little bit more audience friendly.
Yeah. Yeah. It is like, I do sort of leave it to them in that decision a little bit in that they know their audience, like they know who's going to be who they want to get. So, yeah.
So I have to tell you, I got married almost 3 years ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I realized I was marrying a man who had never seen a Sondheim show on stage. And I thought, oh, I can't do this. This something has to change so that I know what I'm getting into. This is, mind you, we got married 9 years after we met.
Okay.
And the show I took him to, as one does to figure out, you know, if you're marrying the right person, Company, a show completely wrong for when you're about to get married.
Oh yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Oh, for real, right? Yes.
Yeah. But he loved it.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Um, and I'm wondering how a show that, started in 1970 resonates with you, both as an audience member and as somebody who got to play the ultimate himbo in the show.
You know, that show it's fascinating to me that Steve wrote it when he was as young as he did and didn't know what it was like to be married. Because he writes about marriage like someone who is really intimately understanding of it. And especially for like people who've been married for a long time, and it's really incredibly insightful. And in this new version that we did with the gender swap and setting it in modern day, I think that it spoke to a whole new generation of people, and I think that the messages were just as timely. The messages about relationships were the same as they were in the 70s. And it's fascinating to me that those truths still are true, you know, in that show. And for me, you know, there aren't a lot of characters written like Andy because they're written for women. Like that's a trope for women. It's not as much a trope for men. And so, gosh, getting to like, as a little gay kid, I wanted to play Belle. Like I wanted to be the Little Mermaid. I wanted to be the baker's wife in Into the Woods. Getting to actually gender bend one of your favorite roles on Broadway is totally just a dream come true. Um, and also just what it says about, like a man getting naked and wanting to just have sex versus a woman who wants to get naked and just have sex, is so different. And so what it says now is really interesting to me.
Yes, and of course the most important question is, have you been to Barcelona?
I have been to Barcelona. I have been to Barcelona once just for a couple of days, but uh yeah, I mean, like I kept joking that I wanted to take a trip there after the show closed, and I haven't been since the show closed, so now I need to go.
Yes, you
Which
do. Now,
yeah.
for those who think that Company was your first experience with Sondheim, we can take you back to Sacramento in 2008. um,
Oh my gosh.
when you were part of the ensemble of Sweeney Todd.
Yeah. My first
Um,
job.
your
Yeah.
first job. What when you look back on that time, because we're t talking, seven on the border of 17 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't know what month it was. Um,
Yeah.
what stands out to you about that experience with Sondheim, and did you ever imagine that you would have the collaborations you would ultimately come to have with him?
So here's what happened. I I moved to New York. I was auditioning. The first job I really booked was I spent like a month in Sacramento doing two plays, doing My Fair Lady and Sweeney Todd, both just in the ensemble of both shows. But before I left town, I auditioned for the Radio City Christmas Spectacular and got cast. And I was going to be like one of the Christmas singers in the show. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have a job for Christmas. This is great. But I also auditioned for Roadshow at the Public Theater in it for a job that I would never get, like in a leading role in a new Stephen Sondheim show. There was no way I was going to get it. I was literally just some kid off the street. I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a manager. I didn't have anything. And while I was doing Sweeney Todd at Sacramento Music Circus, the casting director from the Public Theater called me up and was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be calling you directly, but I'm just letting you know that we're casting you in the show and you booked it and you're going to be working with Stephen Sondheim and all this stuff. And I didn't believe it. And I was like, he must have meant the understudy, or he must have meant I'm swinging the show or something. And I thought that until the first day of rehearsal when I was like, really? But really, it's me. But then, like, I was just some kid who hadn't gone to a fancy school. And I was like, hey, everybody, guess what? I just got cast in Roadshow at the Public Theater. And they were like, what are you talking about? And actually, I was performing with Kate Baldwin. Kate Baldwin was playing Eliza in My Fair Lady. And I sat and she was very nice to me. And we sat and chatted and I told her about it. And she was like, this is exactly what's supposed to be happening. You're really special. You work really hard. You're going to be great in this. Just like get ready. Like she made me feel so confident for something that I was so scared of. But everybody else was like, wait, who are you? And you got cast as what? So it's crazy that I was like doing a regional ensemble version of one of his shows and then got to like the next month go and sit in rehearsal with him every day for 2 months,
And then not only that, you got the best love song from the show.
which was almost not in the show. He cut it from the show. And then one day he came in and was like, all right, here's the deal. We're going to put this in the show. I don't want it to get too sentimental. You can't even look at each other. And so we were like sitting on two boxes far across the stage from each other, singing this love song, but it's the best love song.
Was Roadshow the first time it was sung between two men? Because previously it had been between a man and a woman.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the first. That was the first Sondheim gay love song. Maybe the only one, actually, now, maybe.
Now, a couple years ago, I spoke with Gavin Creel,
Mhm.
who I miss tremendously, just as an audience member, let alone how beautiful he was as a person. But we talked about his experiences because he was in Bounce at the Goodman Theater, which was the first production of the show that became Roadshow. He later did it in DC. I guess this was in 2003.
Yeah.
And when I asked him what stood out to him about that time, he said, he was talking about Sondheim and Hal Prince, and he goes, I watched them in the mud. I got to watch them trying to make the lotus blossom. You were at the end of that process. Were they still in the mud? Did the lotus blossom, or is time going to tell?
Well, you know what's interesting? So John Doyle then took over directing that show, and they completely reworked it. They had decided it didn't work as Bounce, and that which was like Bounce was a big Broadway musical style show with like huge sets, costumes, ensemble, like all this stuff. And John Doyle, who is very stripped back, very heady, we decided he was going to do it totally differently. And Steve just trusted him. And I mean, Steve would fight on things, but anything John wanted to do, he would be like, yep, okay, how do you want to do it? And I think that it was a time, and I think it's one thing that I love about Steve so much is that he loves the reinvention of his own work. He loves for people to take it and put their own spin on it and do things. He's always been a person that is not super precious about those things, though he has strong opinions, obviously, and like in the building of something. I can only imagine what having Hal Prince and Steve in the same room, like who know each other, who've worked together for their whole lives, all this, to make something together must have been so insane to watch. But this was a very different thing, and it was interesting to see him like um offer up himself and his work to somebody else's vision of how it would be. And John Weidman, who wrote the book too, like they would just all get together, and John Doyle had this vision of like what he wanted to make it. And I think that he made something really beautiful. It's a show that Steve had been writing his whole life, essentially. He'd been writing stories for and songs for, and he was obsessed with the story of these two brothers for his whole life. And so it was like in what became the final version of it, I think he made something really beautiful and distilled down a story into something very nice.
And got great names for his two standard poodles.
He did.
I was at the last performance of Roadshow. I
Oh
had,
my gosh.
um, and I just remember it because I was thinking, I think that was the first time I had seen like the first New York run of one of Sondheim's shows without replacement cast in it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see Sweeney Todd there. My first Sondheim show in New York was Sunday in the Park. Um, but it wasn't with Mandy Patinkin or Bernadette Peters. Not that it was bad at all. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's got to be something special to originate a role in a Sondheim show and to have come as you did from the ensemble of Sweeney Todd. Um, were you pinching yourself? I mean, were you just like, do you have a database of all these incredible stories and experiences that you had in that process?
Yeah, I kept a journal because I knew I was like, this is special. I will want to remember this my whole life. And the answer is I'm still pinching myself. You say that to me and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to me. Like I'm just some kid from Utah who grew up. My dad was a construction worker and my mom was a teacher. There's no reason I should be on Broadway. And about getting cast in it too. I think it says so much more about them than it does my talent that they were like, no, that unknown person is the one. Like that's who we're looking for. And, were there people who could sing it better? Sure. Were there people more famous? Yes. Were there people who'd gone to fancier schools than me? Totally. But they were like, whatever the quality is we're looking for, it's that guy. And we're going to trust that he's going to do it. And after a lot of auditions to check to see if I could do it.
But
You know,
you do know
yeah,
that Patti LuPone was unknown at some point. Elaine Stritch was unknown. Ethel Merman, for Christ's sake, was
yes,
unknown at some point. And there are
absolutely.
people watching this who are probably going to go, who was Ethel Merman?
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Not the gays. The gays will know.
Not the gays. Yeah. No, but it's true. I still pinch myself and think I mean, I feel so lucky, and it set me off on a course for my career, for the kind of performer I would be for the rest of my life.
So how do you think your shows are influenced by that experience? Meaning your cabaret shows that you're doing around the
Mhm.
country.
Well, I always sing a lot of Sondheim. I think I've done like 13 different shows, I think is what I counted. Three on Broadway, or at the Hollywood Bowl. And I and so there's a lot of Sondheim music in my shows because it is my favorite music to sing. Because it is so challenging to sing as a singer and a musician, so challenging to act as a performer, that they are so satisfying to perform because they are those things. And so that is one way in which like just the material itself that it is. But also, Steve was also very dark. And I think that when I was a kid, I loved his shows the most because of the weirdness and the darkness and the ingenuity and innovativeness. And I think that I was drawn to it, um, from an early age. And so it is my favorite. It's my favorite thing to perform because I respond to it myself.
But I did see an interview from a year and a half ago or so where you said the one song you could sing over and over again, is I Could Have Danced All Night. So I guess your experience with
Really?
Claybourne must have been good.
Yeah. Oh, from my old show. Yes, from my old show. I do love singing that. I have like a jazz arrangement of that song. I do love singing that song.
So you mentioned all of this seems unbelievable for, gay kid who grew up in Utah. But did you imagine doing anything else? I mean, it was painting apartments wasn't going to be your career.
Thank God. So I still love doing it. You know, I think it's all I wanted to do, and I didn't know if it was going to be possible at all. But I knew I wanted to at least give it a shot. And I'm still giving it a shot.
I, I think between the shows that you've done, being on Gilded Age, et cetera, I don't think you have to worry you know, not having made it.
Thank you. Thanks.
So what if you could pick any show to do next, what would it be? Something new that we don't know, or is there a classic role that you would love to do?
So my degree is in dramaturgy because I'm a big nerd and I love to read and I love working with playwrights. I love like defining like a story, And and so I think the answer is that the show I want to do next is the show that's being written right now that I don't know yet because I love building something together with a playwright and a composer and a director that's my favorite thing is to like I think that people cast me for that now because they're like, well, we know Clay's gonna have something to say. So um so I'm loving that. I'm working on a musical with the Indigo Girls right now. That is so wonderful, just as an actor in it, that I love so much. I would love for that to see the light of day. And also I do want to play Sweeney Todd at some point in my life, really badly.
Yes. If this weren't being recorded, I would have a response to that about the last production, but it's better not to say things that you don't want other people to know. Um,
Okay.
if I'm able to get to Costa Mesa, I'll tell you.
Okay, deal.
Um, on your Instagram account on April 27th, 2024, you described yourself as an irrationally optimistic person. In a world that seems to embrace chaos more and more by every day, how do you maintain that optimism? How do you share that in your shows? And most importantly, how do you keep Bo, if not at least sheltered from that chaos, but at least protected from it for now?
Yeah. This is a hard time to be an irrationally optimistic person. It is hard to maintain that. And I but I do and I always will. And ultimately I just believe in I believe that people will do the right thing, even when it seems like they won't. And they don't always, I mean, like ultimately, I think I believe that. And I think that trusting the best intentions of people, maybe not every single person, maybe some leaders, maybe not, but that like I try to approach interactions with people in that way. And even with people who really disagree with me or don't like me very much for who I am or how I live my life. And but I always think that there is a human level in which we can connect with everyone. And that is sort of, what I talk about in my show is kindness and the nature of it and the nature of goodness. And with Bo, I try to, like we said before, I try to be honest with him about everything. And without, scaring him in a rational way because he's 7. But I do talk to him about like the changes in our government and some of the challenges that might arise because of it for our family. And without saying, big scary things to him. Because I do think it's important he knows, and I don't want to lie to him about that. Yeah, it's a challenging time, but I do think that there are also a lot of things to be optimistic about.
Well, and that's why we need to experience culture because it helps us remember all of those things.
Oh yeah.